This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Dan Lynch and I talked to Miguel de Icaza, one of the earliest and biggest and most important figures in the history of Linux and much else. He did Mono, he did GNOME before that, one of the fathers of GNOME, but he's been involved with Microsoft. He looks ahead of everything. He has some incredibly original takes on cryptocurrency, on why big companies are good and not just bad, on what EU legislation is doing that's coming along that may make all of our lives miserable while opening up the markets inside of app stores. It's just incredible stuff. The guy is awesome, and that is coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 698, recorded Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. Miguel de Icaza. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by IRL, an original podcast from Mozilla. IRL is a show for people who build AI and people who develop tech policies. Hosted by Bridget Todd, this season of IRL looks at AI in real life. Search for IRL in your podcast player. And by IT Pro TV. Give your team an engaging IT development platform to level up their skills. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/twit. Make sure to mention TWiT30 to your IT Pro TV account executive and get 30% off or more on a business plan. Hello again, everybody, everywhere in the world. I am Doc Searls. This is FLOSS Weekly, and we're off to a late start today, so I want to hurry up and introduce my co-host, Dan Lynch himself. There he is, with his music gear off to his left and his hat on and his matching red suspenders and headphones. That's
yeah, cool. And it also matches the mic pop cover that I've got as well.
Oh, that's
Everything's
right,
red around here. Everything's red. It's my favorite color. And, it's great to be back anyway.
Yes, it is. And what does it say on your shirt? It's just a little bit cut off there. OG.
Oh, OggCamp. It's an event. Hang on.
Oh, sure. Okay, there you go. Oh, right. August and Forbes and the rest.
That's the one. Yeah.
That's the one.
As in Forbes. Yeah.
Yeah. So our guest today is Miguel de Icaza, who we've both talked to in the past, I think. And he's famous and great. And I'd want to tarry more, except I just want to get him on the show. So we're off to a late start. So Miguel is, famous for GNOME, Mono, Xamarin, working on and off for Microsoft. Founded the .NET Foundation as sort of an open source embrasure of .NET and other things Microsoft are doing. I think he's one of the greatest ambassadors that Microsoft has ever had, as well as Linux and the other things he's founded. So, Doc is muted. The back channel is saying, "Am I?"
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, so the back channel doesn't know what it's talking about. Okay, great. So, Miguel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Doc. How's it going? It's great to be here.
There's an office you call messy, but isn't.
Mine. It is very. You don't get to see the back.
Where are you, roughly speaking? Are you?
I am in Boston.
You're in Boston. Excellent.
Yes. Yes.
I miss Boston. If I had one place I could choose out of all the places I have lived, that would be my first choice.
Okay.
It doesn't suck being in Santa Barbara or in Bloomington, Indiana, which is where I am now.
Okay.
I'm stationed here for a couple of years, but it's great to have you on. So we could go into a couple of things. One is I'd like to visit. You were in and out of Microsoft. You left recently. I know there's a lot you can't talk about. What can you talk about?
Well, I did go, I've only been at Microsoft once. They acquired our company in 2016, and I stayed up until March. And at the beginning, I kept doing the job that I was doing before, which was working on Xamarin, mobile developer tools, .NET. It was a very exciting time. And the last couple of years, I spent them working on AI and a bunch of things that are not public yet, so I can't really discuss. But I was lucky to be at Microsoft during this period where Satya Nadella was driving a major cultural change at the company, and it was fascinating to watch. How do you steer a company of that size towards new businesses and also new principles. So, I live in awe, and I left in awe. I was impressed with what they were doing. But I wanted to do my own thing and also, take a big break. I've been working since I was 17 years old, and I needed a big break and spend some time with the family and kids. So, I'll do something soon. Not fully decided yet, but there was a great time at Microsoft. I had fun, and it was a little bit difficult to leave, but I wanted my big break.
Excellent. It's you deserve a break, and we wait to see what comes next. That would be interesting. So Miguel, I'm interested in, you've been involved with open source and free software for a very long time, and it's changed a lot in that time. And I'm curious how you think today's kind of open source world is different from how it started, or how do you see it now? The kind of big picture. Has open source really changed that much?
Well, I think, when we started, or at least when I joined the project, and I was not even I wasn't even on the early batch, right? I kind of joined in 1992, and this had already been going for a while. Richard Stallman had launched, this organized effort to build a OS from scratch. But I think that the big difference is that back in the day, we had found a cause, and there was both a lot of promise. There was this amazing feeling of collaboration, and I like to describe Linux probably as the first and probably biggest success of the internet and what humans together can achieve. And so there was this very powerful feeling. A sense of duty, I would say, or at least I feel a lot of people felt that way about promoting open source, about trying to change existing business models, about trying to improve our industry. So that level of excitement, some of it still permeates, I think is very different now. I think that today we understand it. We sort of take it for granted. It's very clinical, right? It's very clinical, very clean. We know what it is, and it has changed. It has changed, and I think it's great. It's been embraced by everybody, right? I mean, when Google first embraced Linux, right? I remember when Google launched, and it was a great search engine. And they had a dedicated Google search for Linux subjects. I don't know if you remember this, but they had a dedicated Google world just for Linux topics. It felt like a major endorsement, having a company that knew what was happening and kind of acknowledged the existence of open source and made it front and center. And now, now everybody does it. If you're not doing Linux or open source, you're doing something very wrong, or you probably don't know how to operate a phone. So, it has changed a lot, and purely from a nostalgia point of view, I would love to get back that feeling and excitement that we had back in that time around changing the world. And I think that, newer generations are definitely doing things like that in new spaces, like I think AI is full of those places, and people excited about the mission. Sadly, I think that the crypto world the cryptocurrency world has that level of excitement. Although I think that fundamentally it is a broken system, right? But so yeah, I think it has changed a lot. It has changed tremendously, and I think it's for the better. So it's very mature now. We know what it is. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, so you said, was it crypto? You said, cryptocurrency and all that kind of stuff. You think it's fundamentally broken? Is that right? Is that what you said? So I'm interested to hear why. Okay, that's interesting. So why do you think that?
I think that the popularity of cryptocurrencies comes from having a foot in multiple worlds, and it's a piece of technology, it's a piece of finance, it's a piece of ideology, and if you're not very well versed in all these things, it's easy to take other people's pitches for granted, and I think that's what's happening with cryptocurrencies. It's a complicated space with a bunch of interesting bumper sticker slogans that are easy to assimilate, but it's fundamentally unsound. And let me explain to you what I think by it's unsound. Cryptocurrencies, at the end of the day, are what finance people called a private currency. And a way of thinking about this is when you go to a casino, you don't really use your dollars, right? You exchange your dollars at the casino for their tokens. And then you use those tokens inside. And then at the end of the day, you go and exchange whatever tokens you have left for your dollars and you leave the place, right? So the cryptocurrencies have been sold on all kinds of grounds. They'll solve inflation. It's a bet against inflation. It's a sovereign currency. No more money can be printed, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's a private currency, very much like a casino one, and it is still bound by the external currencies, right? So at some point, you need to cash out of this world, and at some point, you do need to cash in into this thing. So I think that the problem is that most people really don't have a good sense for what the role of money is, the role of currency, why states print or do not print money. Also, I don't think that, most people think that taxes are really what are funding the federal government. And so there's a bunch of disconnects like that. And I think that a lot of people have fell for this. And then I think that was an initial wave. And then there was a secondary wave where all of these were a lot of creative uses of cryptocurrencies. They gamified Ponzi's, and they made it look like you could make money easily, right? So this second wave, I think, was incredibly toxic and incredibly damaging for a lot of people, because a lot of people bought into this thing as if it was a real investment asset. My issue really comes down to a lot of people not understanding that at the end of the day, it is a private currency system, and no matter what you do, come April 15, right? On April 15, you gotta turn whatever barter you did in the street, financial transactions, foreign transactions, investments in foreign banks or at home, into US dollars to pay your taxes, right? And I don't think that a lot of people realize the nature of money, and they've been kind of tricked into believing cryptocurrencies. So anyways, and it's a shame that the most brilliant minds and young people got kind of sucked into this when there's so many other interesting problems to solve in the world.
Oh boy, this topic alone is good for an entire show. I love that metaphor. I've heard the casino comparison before, because you're taking chances, right? That was kind of the casino thing. Mm-hmm. But really a great metaphor that it is a private currency. And the way it is, it's certainly private to whatever cryptocurrency you're talking about, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the lesser ones. And private companies have emerged to more or less run your life through these things. And we could go further into that or into some other adjacent topic, but First, I need to let people know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by IRL, an original podcast from Mozilla. IRL is a show for people who build AI and people who develop tech policies. It's hosted by Bridget Todd, and this season, IRL looks at AI in real life, looking at things like who can AI help, who can it harm. It features conversations with people who are working to build more trustworthy AI. For example, there's an episode about how our world is mapped with AI, how the data that's missing from those maps tells as much of a story as the maps themselves. You hear about all the people who are working to fill those gaps and take control of the data. There's another episode about gig workers who depend on apps for their livelihood. That one looks at how they're pushing back against algorithms that control how much they get paid and seeking new ways to gain power over data to create better working conditions. For political junkies, there are episodes about the role that AI plays when it comes to the spread of misinformation and hate speech around elections, which is a huge concern for democracies around the world. The one about gig workers is interesting to me because in a way I'm one of those. But the interesting thing to me about it is the algorithms, where these are impenetrable in some ways. And can you open the source of algorithms in a way? Can you look at them? In most cases, we cannot. And even if we can, we don't know what the effects of them are. When you write code, you kind of know what the effects are going to be. Algorithms have all these secondary, tertiary, and quaternary effects that fan out, and you don't know what's going to happen. So that's an interesting topic. So search for IRL in your podcast player. We'll also include a link in the show notes. My thanks to IRL for their support. So, Miguel, you want to go any further on this one, or shall we get to some of the other on the crypto one? I mean, it blew my mind with that one. I think our own back channel sort of in a similar way. It's kind of, wait a minute, that's an obvious metaphor, but I hadn't caught it before. Maybe because it's people, it kind of travels as public, but it's private. I think that's everybody wants to decentralize, right? It looks like, hey, we're decentralizing. We're putting on a blockchain. Everybody keeps part of the database here. It's a duplicated database. We all have possession of some of that. And therefore it's ours, but instead it's actually our being used by something that's inherently private.
And I think that this is interesting, right? Because what you're describing is essentially we get so caught up on the mechanics, right? And people develop so much expertise on the how this thing works, then the mechanics of the consensus algorithms and who's doing and the double chain and the speed and the energy consumption, they get caught up on all of these things, and it is almost like becoming an expert at a sport, right? And memorizing every element of a baseball player, and I don't know what they're called, but they're people that recite games, and they know exactly what transpired. So I think that a lot of passion is spent into this, and at some point, the fundamental problem is that there's a disconnect with the fundamental economics of it. And by the time that you get to understand this thing, you are so bought into this lifestyle and so bought into the mechanics and the knowledge that you've gained that you try to find a justification or try to find why this makes sense. And I think that is where it breaks. And I mean, when I was a kid, I remember asking my dad, where does money come from? And he gave me something about, well, it's gold, and every dollar is backed by some gold, and I was never satisfied with the answer, right? But why is it gold? And if we mine more gold, do we have more money, right? So I lived for, I would say, most of my adult life not really understanding why money was valuable. And I've listened to podcasts, I listened to the American Life One on Money. I was like, okay, I get it, but I don't quite get it. And I think it was about 10 years ago or so, or maybe 8 years or so, I found this blog. I believe it was called New Economic Perspectives. I'm not sure, but it was essentially a bunch of folks that were explaining where money comes from and explains why there's value in money and why do we seek money. And And the theory, and the theory that explains how this system works is very interesting because it's not difficult to understand. That is the interesting piece. It has a couple of, first principles where they describe our economic system. And once you understand that, and it can be explained in a couple of hours, you can grab a book and read it in a couple of days, a lot of this, economic thinking unlocks, right? So the magic, or this magic, this almost impenetrable thing that my dad couldn't explain, 40 years ago when I was a kid, becomes very easy to explain. It's called modern monetary theory is the thing, and my dad is a physicist, right? So I always thought of my dad as the smartest guy in the world, and when it came to money, he didn't really knew what it was, and it would take me about 30 or 40 years to eventually discover where it came from. And I wish that other people had that same that same epiphany that I had 7 or so years ago.
This discussion reminds me of a friend of mine once explained quantitative easing to me by saying that all money is imaginary, and now they've imagined some more. Basically, is how quantitative easing works, essentially. So anyway, while we're talking about, I know people in the IRC are mad about blockchain, and they want to talk about that. It's a bit of a drinking game they have going on when we mention blockchain. So I'll try not to mention it too much. But about the technical side of it, so a few people have mentioned in there things like Web3, which I think you have some feelings about. So what do you think about Web3 and using this kind of blockchain technology for something different?
Well, I am definitely on the camp. I think that once they realized that this currency really didn't fly, they needed to find ways of make it useful. And I think that they're trying all kinds of things. And I have yet to see anything that the blockchain can do. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that the valid uses for something like the blockchain are probably 1% of what is being advertised. So it's almost like a statistical error. And but they've put a lot of money into this. There's a lot of money at stake here. There's investments, there's people's savings, there's a lot of people that have horses in the race. And they're trying to find a way for more people to put in money. And sadly, without getting into the details and the specifics, this entire cryptocurrency ecosystem, right? And again, I'm going to paint with a very thick brush, is essentially techno-Ponzi's, right? And what you do need is you do need to get more people getting more of these cryptocurrencies and putting more money behind this so you can get out. So Web3, for everything that I've seen on Web3 and every pitch that I tried to listen to, they're trying desperately to give it a purpose to something. It's a solution looking for a problem. And I have yet to see anything in this space that doesn't meet that criteria. And I think that there's just a ton of vested interest in trying to make it happen. And I don't think it's going to happen, right? Eventually, we're going to run out of people with disposable income, or people that can be tricked into this. And a lot of people are going to get harmed on the process. And I'm not, I don't like this, right? I don't like this.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry,
Dan.
Go on.
I didn't mean
No,
to
you go ahead.
No, you carry on, because there's a great thread. I have a slight pivot, but yeah.
No problem. I was just going to mention that I was reading, because I knew we might talk about Web3. I've got to be honest, I didn't know much about it, so I did some reading up earlier. And I was reading I'll find the link and put it in the chat for people. There's a really great essay by Moxie Marlinspike, who does Signal and is a great cryptographer and so on, about Web3 and why it's essentially a fallacy, a lot of what it claims. So the decentralization, which is the big thing that they all claim, kind of falls apart when you realize that there's only two companies that provide the services to read the Ethereum blockchain that they're using. You can do it yourself, but his argument is people don't want to run their own servers end users do not want to run their own servers. They're not going to do that. And you can't do what you need to do on a device like a phone. You need a server. So you're going to go to a company to get that service, which is one of, at the moment, 2 companies. I'll put the link in. Just really interesting on why the whole Web3 thing kind of feels like a bit of a house of cards.
Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely on that camp. And I don't know if people know this, but there's a great blog called Web3 is Going Great. I believe that's the name, by Molly White. She's based in Boston. I've never met her, but the website is very good looking, and she keeps documenting every one of these things, every one of these promises when they blow up or they're unfulfilled. So it's a great place to catch up on some of these things. But again, I've been trying to look at this as maybe there is something, right? I'm a technologist. I love technology. Every time there's a new piece of hardware, I try to get it. I try to mess around with it. My messy desk on the back is a bunch of Raspberry Pis. Even if I'm not an electronics guy, I like to find out about these things. And I'm afraid that the Web3 stuff, I've looked at it. I've spent some time on it. It's time I'm never going to get back, sadly. But there's not much there. And I think that at this point, we're reached the point where it is being driven with people with strong economic incentives to get more people to put in money so they can get it out. So I think that this qualifies very much as a very well-funded scam.
Wow. Okay, so I have a...
On that note.
Yeah, no, I think it's... There's the pull quote for the show. Here's a slight pivot, and it's an interesting thing for me. I was recalling, I was in college in the late 1960s, which was interesting for lots of things. The civil rights era, anti-war, all that stuff. I was very involved in that. I came out of tech in a way because I was a ham radio operator, but which is the closest you could get back in those days. But in the summer I sold ice cream from an ice cream truck, and I had a coin changer on my belt. Everything was a quarter or less that I sold. And starting in 1964, the U.S. went from all the money, the paper money said payable to the bearer in silver on demand. It was backed by silver, like your dad was talking about. You mined money, and it was convertible. But if you looked at the side, there's a slot in the change thing, so you could see the quarters, and they were like mostly silver the first year, 65 that I did it, 65, 66, 66 or 68. And they were mostly silver for dimes and quarters, and they were like half and then like very few. And I kept all the silver ones and actually exchanged them for and I gave them to my parents. Now and as a gift for their anniversary or something like that. And unfortunately, later our house is raided and was stolen, which is sad. It wasn't so much raided. There's just somebody broke in and looked where something would likely be hidden and found it there. But here's what I went through at the time mentally, which is that now they were Federal Reserve notes. I don't even know what it says in our money now, but trust went from the metal to the government. We started to trust the bigness of the government. And where I want to pivot there is that only governments can make fiat currency. And I'm wondering, even though they're looking to get into the blockchain-based kind now, every government substantial government is all looking at this and wanting to more or less step in front of it. And I've talked to friends at banks and other places like that are very familiar with this. So there's a name for it. My wife is actually much more up on this kind of stuff than I am. So kind of wish she was on it. But it still says Federal Reserve note on cash. Yeah, there it goes. And our producer is telling us in the back channel, yep, it still says that. But we now have a similar trust in big companies. You and I don't think Dan, are looking at each other through Apple devices. I know Ant is looking through a Windows device. these are run by big companies, right? And I think Dan is probably the one orthodox among us, looking at us through a Linux device. But I mean, and they all still work. That's great. Dan's nodding. That's cool. He gets the award. But we need these big companies for a lot of things. I mean, I think and you've written and talked a bit about this. And I think when you worked on Mono and your early embrasure of C#, I mean, everybody's busy in the Linux world, busy crapping all over Microsoft. And you looked at what they were doing and said, wait, C#'s kind of cool. I remember this. You worked on Mono to kind of embrace all that. And that was, I think you recognized, and we all recognize, at least at an intuitive level, that you kind of, you need the big companies. And now clouds have come along, right? Everybody's relying on AWS. My server, Searls.com, has been around since 1995. It used to be under my desk.
Yes.
Then later it was in a rack, literally a rack. It was a physical thing in a rack at Rackspace, because Rackspace was an early sponsor of Linux Journal, and 2 Linux Journal women married 2 Rackspace founders, actually.
Okay. I did not know that.
No, yeah. Funny thing about Linux Journal is that, this is a side point, is that nearly 100% of our readers were male, and 100% of our executive staff is female. Our managing editor, all of it is pretty funny. But
I
anyway,
subscribed to that magazine on day one. I probably, I don't have, I left it in Mexico, but a friend kept, I hope he still has it, kept all my books. So I hope he still has my Linux magazine number 1.
I have a stack of them in Santa Barbara, and I was looking at recently. I think it's a treasure. And but where I'm going with this is, now Searls.com is in, it's not at AWS, but it's at a big company's server, right? And my mail is handled by Rackspace as well. Searls.com mail all goes through their spam filter, because we need them to filter the spam.
Yes.
So most people use Google for that. Search engines, have to be huge, right? We need these are utilities in a way, but utilities are closed in some ways as well. But there are virtues to that in a way. And you wrote about this and have talked about it. I think that the fact that Apple from the start has worked on, it's not just that they positioned around privacy for marketing purposes. It's that their customers are human beings. They're not a business company, especially. They don't do much B2B, even though they sell iPads by the zillions for point of sale and stuff like that. They're not a B2B company. They just deal with people for the most part.
Right.
And we as customers pay them a lot of money, and we care about privacy, they care about privacy. So tell us more about where your thinking is on that. And can we ever move past it? Do we want to move past it?
Well, I mean, I think you used a great quote, and I'm going to let you use it later. I don't want to steal it, but I think that one thing that bothers me about these big companies is that I would say that today I happen to like what the Apple leadership is doing in terms of preserving privacy, right? So I think they're doing great, but companies go through executives change, the market changes, the governments change, legislation changes, and the companies morph as a result, right? As the system changes, the company and their behavior changes. And right now, I'm very happy with, Apple. I work at Microsoft, and I was close enough to, the executive sort of level that I'm very happy and confident with Microsoft. But things can change and they can turn for the worst. So I think that the fear is that I would like to live in a world where, we didn't depend on individuals or the current market conditions to get the right outcomes. And I believe that this is a place where there's 2 components, right? One would be, kind of the big hammer would be to have regulation. And I know a lot of people don't like regulation, but, having some sort of regulation that controls these big companies or even small and medium companies. And the other one is, we keep talking about, capitalist systems having this duty to shareholders, right? That their sole objective is to maximize shareholder value. And there's some, debate over whether it's an absolute or not, and whether that's the intent. But I think that in addition to having this metric, that companies should have a social mission, or should have a duty to fulfill, and that they are also rated on that capacity. Sadly, the one knob that we have to control the behavior of a company is money. So I don't know how to turn social responsibility into a knob, right? Whether that's, lower taxes. If you do the right thing, we'll lower your taxes, or if you do the wrong thing, we'll increase your taxes, or maybe that's a penalty. But, I am happy with some big companies doing certain things, and I'm not happy with other big companies doing things that I think should be rectified. And some companies have a mix, right? Some companies are good in some ways and bad in others. So I wish we didn't have to depend on the goodwill, on the management, and the way the wind blows. So regulation, seems like Europe is going to pass some interesting regulation, both for media companies and digital marketplaces. I happen to think that Apple is doing a great job, but the European Union is probably going to start to regulate that space as well. I'm not convinced it's the right thing, but it kind of goes along those lines of regulation to ensure that companies have a long-term. It's a long-term net good for society.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we're sharing this on the back channel. Steve Jobs went out of his way to say he didn't care about shareholders, and that he was working for the customers, and he was working for himself. He was an art guy. He did art. That's what he was about. And I think Apple's success to some degree is dependent on that. I think the ghost of Steve Jobs and his taste. I mean, what he said about Microsoft is a really interesting thing. He was interviewed once by Robert Cringely, and in the interview, he leaned back and they asked him, what about Microsoft? And he was on unfriendly terms at that time with Microsoft. He later got more friendly again. But because he and Bill actually liked each other, I think, as human beings. But he leaned back and he said, in 4 words, it was perfect. He looked like Satan when he said it. He said, "They have no taste." And I thought that was just a wickedly right-on comment at that time, and may still be true. I think it's really where they came from, And I think that the DNA of a company matters to some degree. The questions you never ask are the ones that the dead guy on the wall of the lobby would already had the answer for. I know with I talked about that once with the guy who's the CEO, Lee Scott of Walmart, who said that. That Sam Walton still ran Walmart. That Sam Walton never wanted to spend more than 1% of their bottom line or whatever it was on advertising. They just weren't going to do it, and they never did.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And what you're saying to me, one of the most, there's this great book called, I think it's called Thinking in Systems, and it helped me change the way that I see at some of these problems, right? Which, in the particular case of what you say on Steve Jobs commenting on Microsoft and they have no taste, is not only a matter of hiring a couple of people to get some taste or trying to appoint somebody, right? I think that what Apple has is they've been nurturing a particular way of thinking, a particular person that they hire, a particular kind of people that care about certain things, and they've built up this stock, right? So I don't know if it's DNA more than they have a stock of people that care about this thing, and this is what this book talks about, right? How do you manage stocks of things, and in this case, is people, talent, and opinions, right? And Apple has built up this stock of people that care about these particular things, right? And not everybody cares about the same, but in general strokes, that's what they have hired. And you can't just sprinkle, a handful of folks on this and completely change the company, right, in a different direction. This is what makes me, this is what to me is so exciting about such a cultural direction, right? He's had to, in this model of stocks that this book talks about, he's turned off the faucet of certain behaviors and turned on the faucet of other behaviors, right? He's trying to reshape the company, and it takes a very long time to make these changes. Kind of like moving a very, very large boat on the ocean, right? You can't stop that easily. You can't turn it quickly, and it takes time. Now, he's not going in the direction of competing with Apple, right, for user experience, but he's changing it in ways that I think are net positives for the world and for the company. But yeah, I think Apple is unbeatable, and it's not just because they came up with a great design for the notch on the phone. They just have a stock of people that care about this at a fundamental level. So today we saw it with the notch, and we'll saw it with the braided band or whatever it is. But these are people that think about this day in and day out, and it's an advantage that they're going to have for a very long time. Anyways, I'm not even sure how we ended up here, but I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this way of thinking about companies and systems, and what do you prioritize, and what do you encourage? What does the system make easy, and what does the system make difficult, right? And we see it right now, actually, with Twitter, right? If the leaks from the whistleblower are right, and I have no reason to doubt it, is that the system encouraged certain behaviors from the management team that were not necessarily the same ones that a security professional cared about, right? And unless you make a systemic change, you're not going to get the results that you want. So, anyways, I'm just listening about that book. It's just very interesting.
Oh my gosh, there was in the same way Apple is about art, the system of Microsoft, I think. I don't know if you want to go into this. We may need to have a second show for this. But I'm remembering, I wrote a book for Microsoft once. That was about Web TV back in the 90s when they bought Web TV. Yeah. And everybody thought the TV was going to eat the web rather than the other way around, which is exactly what happened. And I said that was going to happen. It was going to be the other way around. And the guy that I worked with at Microsoft said, watch this. Nobody at Microsoft can't go a paragraph without saying the word smart. That it was all about smart. And it was all about what he called more school, that they invented the term campus, that you had a campus and you were graded on a curve and you got grades and things like that. And, it was started by two smart guys that had perfect SAT scores, and that's kind of what it was about. I don't know if you want to go into that or not, because I know Dan has a question queued up, and I have to help pay for the show by letting everybody know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly, this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Your IT team needs the skills and knowledge to ensure that your business is a success, and with IT Pro TV, more than 80% of users who start a video actually finish it. IT Pro TV is engaging, and your team will enjoy learning on their platform. Give your team the tools they need to make your business thrive. Courses are entertaining, they're binge-worthy, keeping your team interested and invested in learning. The tech industry is evolving, changing rapidly, and your team needs to be trained today. When a new software release, system upgrade, or cyber threat faces your business, IT Pro TV offers the training and perspective of those disruptions in days, if not hours. So why is IT Pro TV right for your business? Well, get all training and certifications for your team done all in one place. IT Pro TV has every vendor and skill you need for your IT team training. They produce Microsoft IT training, Cisco training, Linux training, Apple training, security, cloud, and much more. More than 5,800 hours worth, ranging from technical skills to compliance to soft skills. You can do so much more with an IT Pro TV business plan. Track your team's results, manage your seats, assign unassigned team members, access monthly usage reports, see metrics like logins, viewing time, tracks completed, and more. Easily manage teams, manage subsets of users or teams by providing them with customized assignments, monitoring progress and reporting on usage of the platform. Assignments can be full courses and/or individual episodes within courses. Advanced reporting, get immediate insight into your team's viewing patterns and progress over any period of time with visual reports. And don't forget that IT Pro TV has individual plans too. Give your team the IT development platform they need to level up their skills while enjoying the journey. For teams of 2 to 1,000, volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/twit. Make sure to mention TWiT30 for your IT Pro TV account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. Okay, Dan, take it.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. Thanks, Doc. Yeah. So I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but I want to talk a bit about security and distribution models for software and so on. It sounds really boring when I say that, but hopefully it won't be that boring. I was reading your blog about the Epic Games versus Apple, legal case and all that stuff, which I think is still ongoing at the moment, still rumbling on, about app stores and control of app stores and stuff. And a lot of people in my kind of Linuxy world will talk about the fact that the App Store is just like our old repositories used to be, with your package manager and all the rest of it. But I suppose there is a question in here, I promise. But I suppose that the question is, do you think having one company or one entity in control of what software is allowed to run on a system, does that limit creativity in some way, or that kind of hacker culture that we know of?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it does limit the innovation. It limits the things that you can put in. Absolutely. I mean, there is no question that it does limit it. Though my view, in particular with the iPhone and Android, is that we are not now asking, we're not asking. The reality is that the globe, right? Humanity now is putting all of their information, private information, into these devices. And it is imperative that we protect the integrity of these devices. We have our bank account information. Some people have affairs that they're, keeping from other folks. They have business transactions, deals, insider information, and everybody's carrying one of these things. So while I understand that you might not be able to run, for example, a simulator for the Commodore 64 with some ROMs that you downloaded from the internet on the device, and it is a shame, right? The good news is that you can get yourself a device that can do that, right? If you really want to do this thing, you can get a PC or a Mac or whatever, or a Linux machine and get it. So I think that this is a case where we're protecting these devices that almost every human on this planet has is more important than the handful of things that are not there, right? Or the innovation that we're missing out. The other component is that, hacks are essentially a function of, how many hacks, how good the hacks are, and what the impact is. It's a function of the market size. And, back in, 1998, we used to say, hey, Linux has no viruses. Linux has no bugs, right? And we used to think that we were just very secure, right? But it turns out that it was a function of the market. It was a function of what was the incentives, right? If you hack a Linux machine, you probably got nothing but access to an empty HTTP server. Now these days, finding a remote kernel exploit for a Linux machine, can get you access to millions of dollars, right? So the incentives are much higher. So I think that, well, there is certainly a downside for me as a software developer, right? I have all my hacks and I would like to run those all the time. In fact, I have an app, right, that Apple will not allow on the App Store, and I run it locally. Oh, and right now it's not even displaying. Oh, I haven't enabled developer mode on my freshly installed operating system, but I have this little app. Usually before yesterday, when I updated, this was my COVID graphs app. And it's an app to keep an eye on on COVID in Massachusetts. And you can change it, but I built it for my own use. Apple does not allow COVID apps into the store to avoid having to police information. So I picked my data source. I have a script that runs every night, updates it, and updates my watch. So every day I can see how COVID is doing here, right? But so yes, it limits. I wish I could share this with more people. The source on GitHub if you want to get it. But I wish it was accessible to more people. But I think it is the right call because ultimately you're exposing at this point these billions of people to this thing. So you need to. It is one of those things where the benefit for society as a whole is more important than a handful of us wanting to run our personal COVID app on the phone. So now that said, like I mentioned, the European Union is going to get a heavy hammer to both Google and Apple. And I personally am very scared for this future. Because despite all the flaws that these stores have today and the hacks that still manage to make it, what we're going to see is a lot of vulnerable people are going to be targeted by the most efficient scamming machine humanity has ever seen, right? Borders and the internet make hacking from a different country very viable, very low risk with a really high payout. So I think that the European legislation that I have no question will happen will mark the end of these phones as relatively safe devices. And I'm trying to relish this last few months of a stable system. For myself and my family, right? I mean, I think I'm paranoid enough. I am securely conscious enough that I don't do many things that my family members do. And I think that they will be the first ones that get hit. People that are not security people. And they will be scammed hard. So that's my concern. That's my thing with the Apple Store. I do not like the walled garden. I just had an app. I submitted it to Apple. They rejected me over so many little things that I was like, Jesus Christ, just let me get it in, right? It's finally approved. But it was frustrating. But at the end of the day, this funnel shrinking, right? What they're doing is millions of people submit apps, and this funnel, this process, this thing kind of weeds out a lot of problems. It doesn't weed out everything, but it reduces the number of potential attacker or people that potentially can scam you. So I do appreciate it, even if I'll be the first to complain about app review, right? Those guys are like bouncers in a club. I hate those guys, right? I mean, I don't think anybody in the history of humanity has ever can say, one nice thing about a bouncer at a club, and that's what they are. But they do help keep the ecosystem safe, and it's an incredibly juicy market. So anyways, on the one hand, I think the hacker in me is happy for the EU legislation. The citizen in me is mourning preemptively the hell that is going to be unleashed on us. So, some good, some bad.
So just for anyone who doesn't know, because I had a look at this earlier, the EU's I can't remember the actual name. It's DMA is
digital markets. Yeah, I think it's digital markets something. Digital Markets Act, something like that. Yeah.
So this is a ruling that came out of the EU in March, I think, of this year, and they're going to basically force companies like Apple and Google and others to open up their app stores and other things to third-party developers, basically. So basically, I think what you were saying was remove the bouncer, if you like, in that analogy, and just let anybody in, open the door and let anybody in. And and I suppose the worry is that, while we like to believe that everybody's above board and has good intentions, there are certainly people who don't, and having no security or having nobody on the door checking that could be an issue. But on the other argument, I suppose there's the argument that it's market forces as well. Will that leave it more open to this kind of market force of demand and popularity and so on?
The problem with security is that it's not like you have the problem is that there's really no market force here, right? The once this is open, right, all you gotta do is trick grandma or a kid, hey, we have this exclusive game, wanna try it out? And they're gonna try it out, and what do you know? It comes with a hack inside. And Google and Apple will have absolutely no visibility into what this is, into what got sideloaded, into what got installed, how much of the system got hacked. So that's my fear, right? They're going to trick a lot of people into installing dubious software, and they're going to exploit it. So, but again, I'm warning it preemptively because I think it's a done deal. I don't think anything is going to stop it. So it is going to happen. And so I guess we just got to be prepared to teach our families about these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me that, you're doing a good job of looking like two layers into things. And, in a similar way to what you were saying earlier about cryptocurrencies, that they're inherently private. There's what they're missing, what the EU lawmakers are missing is that these, in fact, are private markets run by companies. It's similar in some ways because it isn't the open marketplace. It's two really very
right.
Contained data stores, and it is kind of like saying, ignoring the fact that this is a feudal system. They are lords of a domain. We're all serfs in there. We can complain about that if we like, but that's the status quo. And by saying, no, you're going to have to let anybody do whatever they want inside your feudal system is an issue. I had a different issue with both the GDPR, which I really was enthusiastically behind when it came on, and for that matter, the CCPA in California, which is that they treat users as mere users, as what in Europe they call a data subject, and the data processors and data controllers were the servers. So I'd like to go to here's a case that I've been making, and I'm curious to run it past you, which is that we made the wrong decision, we in this sort of geeky grand sense among geeks, in the early days of the web to sort of get stuck on client server, which might as well be called slave master. When we could all be masters of our own servers, that was cool. But now that we're not, the status quo became, it's up to all the servers of the world to give us whatever freedoms or security or privacy that we want, which is why we have to now, thank you lawyers, making zillions of dollars, have to check off that we have consented to terms that completely violate the spirit of the GDPR while obeying its letter. We got consent. So
yeah.
And there is in me, as there may be in you, a Silicon Valley libertarian geek as well, which says that every new law protects yesterday from last Thursday, and has to be with us for the next X number of years, and also doesn't appreciate really what works in the thing that you're trying to regulate. And I think that's another of your points, is it not?
It is. And I think the Europeans. I understand that some of this is some internal lobbying, some external lobbying. And I think that when you listen, when you see the returns that Apple and Google are making, and there are these insane numbers, it is it's easy to demonize that, and I'm sure that they have no shortage of stories of local European developers that have struggled or have not been given the same rights that Apple has, that they would push a law like this, right? So it is almost like a mob, right? And I don't think that we have really understood the problem. And I think that you summarized it very well, which is where legislation we're legislating for problems that we think we have and not fundamentally fixing the fundamental problems. And I think that is lost in the noise. I mean, I think that Apple has been trying to educate people, but I think it's a lost cause. I think they're going to crack this open.
So we are down in the short rows at the end of the show, actually past where we normally go. Are there any questions we haven't asked that you'd like to address in a very brief way? Or we could save it for another show, because I want you back so bad.
That's okay. We can do that. No, I think, the only thing I would like to say is, I talk about this MMT thing, which I find, even if you're I'm almost 50, right? Even if you're at this age, it's a good time to learn how money works. And while I do like Stephanie Kelton's book, The Deficit Myth, she just mentioned that Randall Ray has a new book coming up. And I recommended it the other day on my Twitter feed. I'll try to find it and send you a link. But, I really think that it is time for all of us to upgrade our understanding on money, especially when all these interesting people are trying to take it away from us. So, I'll send you a link later. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah,
please do. I love that. That's another pull quote. We need to upgrade our understanding of money. Okay, so our last one, it is when we ask everybody, it's kind of a control question. What are your favorite text editor and scripting language?
Well, I still use Emacs, so all habits die hard. I still use Emacs. I still use VI for quick edits. I use Visual Studio Code these days, sometimes on and off. I think if I had to pick a favorite, it would be Emacs. And scripting language, I still use Perl. I know the world has moved to Python and AI is all done in Python, but all habits die hard. I still write my quick hacks in Perl and Sed and Bash. So, and I haven't really transitioned to JavaScript. So
that's funny. I was thinking that I think in answers to this question, we could go back and check that Emacs is about tied with VI and others, Vim, so on, so, and with some very vigorous support.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always have my Emacs here.
Anyways. There it is on our back channel. So, Miguel, this has been fantastic having you on the show, and we will have to have you back. We said it to almost everybody,
excellent.
but I feel like we've left many turns unstoned here, so we need to.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure talking to you folks.
Yeah.
Thank you for the time.
Likewise. Thanks a lot, man. See you soon.
Have a good one.
Yeah. So Dan, that was good, to say the least.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, as you basically said there, I'm sure we could talk for another 2 or 3 hours and still have things to say. So maybe we should do that at a future time. Yeah.
I also think, one of the things that Miguel said, I think more than once around cryptocurrency and once around what's coming along with the DMA in Europe, we're kind of at a threshold time, a liminal time, an in-between time right now, I think. I'm feeling it right now we watch housing prices, and in the US they've peaked and they're starting to get soft. And there are a lot of things that feel like they're ready to crash to me. I've felt like online internet advertising has been ready to crash for a long time. I don't know if that ever will, because the illusion of effectiveness is too well supported by numbers, whether they're fatuous or not. They're there, and the agencies buy them. But I do think something's going to change. I think we're coming up to a point here, and there were a number of things that just stuck with me from this show. Yeah.
Definitely. It was good to get into like the economic stuff as well, which is quite interesting. I think we could have talked a lot more about that. We can do that on, I don't know, Economics Weekly or some other show.
we need one of those. Well, we've gone way over, and we need to get to the post show. So, So thanks to you, and we'll see you soon, everybody.
Let's give him a second.
Oh, wait a minute.
plug.
Wait a minute. I forgot the plugs.
Give him a second plug.
Because I'm so aware of the time. Plug something, Dan, real quick.
Plug something. Yeah. Okay.
I have to plug next week.
Yeah, I can plug something. So I'm very quickly. I'm raising money at the moment for Shelter, which is a homeless charity here in the UK, and Shelter Merseyside, particularly, which is the area I live in, which is where Liverpool is. Yeah, so there you go. Ant's already found it. I'm doing a thing called Kip on the Cop, which is basically we sleep out for the night, and we get sponsorship to do that. So a group of us are going to sleep rough for the night outside and experience what that's like, which hopefully will give us a better understanding, but also to raise money for other people in the area and to help Shelter and to do that. So there we go. That's my good deed for a while.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks for that. And I want to plug next week. We have Andy Parsons coming on. He's with the Adobe Content Authenticity Project. That is an open source project and has been recommended to us. So that is coming up next week, and we will see you then.
Hey, we should talk Linux. It's the operating system that runs the internet, a bunch of game consoles, cell phones, and maybe even the machine on your desk. But you already knew all that. What you may not know is that TWiT now has a show dedicated to it, the Untitled Linux Show. Whether you're a Linux pro, a burgeoning sysadmin, or just curious what the big deal is, you should join us on the Club TWiT Discord every Saturday afternoon for news, analysis, and tips to sharpen your Linux skills. And then make sure you subscribe to the Club TWiT exclusive Untitled Linux Show. Wait, you're not a Club TWiT member yet? Well, go to twit.tv/clubtwit and sign up. Hope to see you there.